Hello, YouTubers and YouTuberettes. This will be part one of a map of my life. And even though it is part one, it will cover the entire period of time from when I was born to current times. And I will, in future episodes, go into more detail on various places and events and so on that were part of my life. But we will begin with me being born. I chose to be born in Kentucky, in Breckinridge County, Kentucky, near the Ohio River, in a city that no longer exists. It's a city that was called Chenault, and I lived there for 6 months. I then decided to move with my family, which was my mom and my brother Joe. Joe was a year older than myself, and we moved to Hammond, Indiana, which is on the southern tip of Lake Michigan, a suburb of Chicago. Hammond, Indiana. Lived there for 14 years, went to grade school there. And I enjoyed myself in Hammond, Indiana. The only celebrities I saw in person in Hammond, Indiana that I can remember, we went into Chicago occasionally and watched some of the live stage shows there in Chicago where they might have a movie playing and then a live entertainer. And we saw Jackie Gleason before he was famous, doing a one-man show on stage. Also saw Alan Young. Alan Young was known later in life for Mr. Ed, and he also did a comedy live appearance at some theater in Chicago, and we saw him. I also saw Gene Autry and Roy Rogers. Saw Gene Autry at least twice and Roy Rogers once. Saw Gene Autry in Chicago at a theater, and also saw him in Hammond, Indiana at the Civic Center, doing a live rodeo type show. And Gene Autry was my childhood hero. I liked his movies the best of all. Those of you who do not know who Gene Autry is, he is the person you hear singing on the radio or wherever you hear people singing Christmas songs each year. He had the hit version, the first version, and the hit version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He also had Santa Claus is Coming to Town and other great recordings that I enjoyed when I was a kid. And uh, I did get to meet Gene Autry much later in life, toward the end of his life. But I stay in Hammond, Indiana right now. When I was 14, we moved back to Kentucky, to Andyville, Kentucky, beautiful downtown Andyville, Kentucky, and lived there for a couple of years. Had my first car there, a 1946 Packard, which I bought in 1954 for $200. And in about I guess it was 1955, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and somewhere in the period of time when I was about 14 years of age living in Kentucky, I decided I wanted to get into show business. I wanted to be an entertainer, and I started making moves that would eventually lead me in the proper direction, I will say, of being in show business, which I did eventually get into, but it took me a long time. But living first in Andyville and then in Louisville, I started watching some of the movies of the day, the different movies from the 50s, and I was amazed at the great acting of James Dean when I saw him on screen for the first time. And I worked at a gas station making, first I think it was 85 cents an hour, then 90 cents an hour, then 95 cents an hour. Started saving my money, and in 1956, April 2nd, 1956, I moved to Los Angeles, California on my own, not knowing anyone. I left the comfort zone. I had a wonderful, loving mom and a brother who was more than just a brother, he's my best friend, and I left that for the uncertainty of Los Angeles with a few $100s in my pocket that I had saved. And I did not know anyone in Los Angeles, did not know anyone in Hollywood, of course, and I traveled out there and eventually got a job working in a warehouse. Stationers Corporation was the name of the place. But that was, I arrived in Los Angeles April 5th of 1956, then stayed in Los Angeles until 1957, well, actually 1958, January 1958, I enlisted in the Army Reserve, actually 6 months active duty, 5.5 years reserves. Went to Fort Ord, California, then back to Los Angeles. Then from Los Angeles to Fort Gordon, Georgia. I was a soldier in the Army for the 6 months until July of 1958. Then I became a civilian again, lived in Los Angeles, stayed there until 1960, and moved to New York City, beautiful New York City, downtown New York City. And I did not see any celebrity that I can remember in New York City in 1960. I lived there from 1960, October 1960 until October 1961. And then I moved, started traveling west again, but this time I moved back to where? Not back to, but to Las Vegas. Moved from New York City to Las Vegas, Nevada. Got there in 1961, October 1961. And that really helped me a lot because I got into radio in Las Vegas. And I also eventually became a movie extra. And then eventually I moved back to Los Angeles and became a movie extra, then an actor. And I became successful as an actor eventually. It took me a long time. And I saw and quite often met and quite often worked with celebrities along the way. Between the 1956 and 1960, when I lived in Los Angeles, I would go into Hollywood each weekend and watch live TV shows, and I saw such entertainers as Tennessee Ernie Ford. Some of these names will mean nothing to you right now, but they were big stars at the time. Tennessee Ernie Ford, who had possibly the biggest hit of anyone between 1950 and 1960, had a song called 16 Tons. Got to see him do his show very often, and I also got to watch the NBC Comedy Hour, where I saw Jonathan Winters for the first time, but I would see him in the future, and I would actually get to work with him eventually. And I saw entertainers such as the Coasters, who were rock and rollers, big time rock and roll vocal comedy group. They were great. I saw them. I saw, let's see, who else did I see? I got to watch Nat King Cole do his TV show. He had a great TV show. It never did become successful like it should have, but he was a great entertainer, so I got to watch him and learn from him. And all these times when I was watching someone perform, I was absorbing it like a sponge. And I did get to watch a show at Hollywood Bowl one time with Bob Hope and Danny Thomas and let's see who else was on it, Eddie Cantor and Jerry Lewis and Liberace and Jimmy Durante, a whole bunch of people. And I started seeing and watching the live shows more and more often when I was in California, and then later, of course, I moved to New York where I saw nobody, and then I moved to Las Vegas, and started meeting and working with a lot of big-time celebrities. But then after moving back to Hollywood from Las Vegas, I stayed there and worked for 26 years actually as a movie extra and movie actor, and then moved to Tennessee where I now reside, and I'm a YouTuber, of course, and I've been a YouTuber since April 10th of 2006. So I've been around the country a lot. I've never been outside the United States, and future episodes of Map of My Life, I will go into detail about many people that I've met, and some of the things I've done, and some of the things that I did that were good and intelligent, and some of the things I did that were not so good and were stupid. And I made lots of mistakes, and it took me a long time to make it, but I did eventually make it in Hollywood. Yes, actually Hollywood. Paramount. Paramount is the only major studio in Hollywood, and that's where I had my little dressing room, my home, for 4 years. I'll tell you more about that in the future, but for right now, I thank you for watching the first episode of Map of My Life.